Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions.
Welcome everybody to another edition of the ACTS Town Hall. We do have a great panel group. We've got three folks that have certainly been involved in successful dig law legislation in the past and continue to kind of lead the pack going forward. I would like to introduce myself, Roger Cox. I'm the president of ACTS. And I want to thank folks who meet me at our state summits as I go around the country, who remind us that they view the different topics we have in the town hall, use it for a resource. We're grateful for that. And at this time, I'd like to start with Kemp. Kemp, briefly introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. Kemp Garcia, running a company called Dig Law Advocates, where we help both sides of the aisle, contractors and utilities, try to determine if where the faults or are dealing with claims and to that effort. I've also been involved with revisions to the Washington State Dig Law in 2011. And then we just did it again this last year, and also a member of the National Utility Contractors Association, a past president there. And I guess one last thing is, Roger, thank you. I'm now the 2024 Damage Prevention Hero. So thank you.
Congratulations. Sandy?
Yeah, I'm Sandy Sanford in Mississippi. I am the lobbyist and attorney for Mississippi 811, the Mississippi Damage Prevention Council, who is the kind of the law creating or suggesting group for the state, and also represent as attorney the enforcement board. So that's what I do, and part of the job is to be in the Capitol every day during session with this client and others. So I kind of work in that world.
Thank you. And Bill?
Good morning. Bill Turner, Tennessee 811 President and CEO, and I'm also a registered lobbyist.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Bill, and we can kind of go around the table with these questions, if you would. So, Bill, if someone were to ask you for your advice, and I'm sure that happens to lots of folks, as to the first step, the very first step to consider when pursuing legislative changes, what would you tell them?
Collaboration. Get all the stakeholders at the table. Find out what everybody needs, what they want, what they don't want. But just establishing that group of stakeholders, everybody that your legislative change is going to touch and feel. I know that a lot of the utilities, specifically the stakeholders, some have interest in some things because of federal regulations. Some don't see that as important because they're not federally regulated. So in the past, when we've addressed these type things, such as mandatory membership, we lay some ground rules at the very beginning when we get this group together. We typically establish a mission statement, and some that come to mind years ago was that was very impactful is we got all the stakeholders that were at the table to agree that damage prevention is utility neutral, meaning it's important to all of us. Doesn't matter if we're water, gas, electric, sewer, telephone, it's important to all of us. So just collaboration, getting everybody that it touches at the table talking.
Sandy, does that sound familiar?
No, yeah, it does sound familiar. And I would add this, since we're talking in the beginning, and just three things I think to remember in this fundamentally. First is passing legislation is extremely difficult. It doesn't matter if you're in a state like Bill and I, where there's super majorities in both chambers. And I'm not sure about Washington, the super majority may be the other way, or majorities, but it doesn't matter. It's hard, and there are plenty of things to derail it. Second is we can have the best policies, talk to all the stakeholders. This is inherently a political process. That it is political, whether we want it to be or not. So there's a lot that goes on with that. And then also the reality is, in the grand scheme of a session, legislative session, when you have things like Medicaid and education and things, damage prevention is not a high priority in a capital. It's just not. It's the highest to us. And so all those three things matter when you're trying to do a calculus. So I would say with that first, my first step is, do you really need legislation? If there is a rule or regulation, or if your authority has the ability to create a rule or regulation, that is a much simpler path than legislation, generally speaking. So that, but I agree with everything Bill said. I would just say, first figure out, do you really need it? Because it's not going to be easy. But sometimes you have to do it, and we'll talk, I know, on this call about the process.
Kemp, can you add to that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Is the collaboration and the likes, and Sandy, you're right. We're super majority the other side of the aisle. So but it doesn't really matter either side of the aisle. They all have, exactly like you said, they have their own agendas that they want to push. Damage prevention is not the big one. But I think what we do is, what we've done in the past is sit down as a stakeholder group, and we identify the issues that we can address, and what are starting points, what are absolute no-goes, and we go through that process as a stakeholder group, and before we as a smaller stakeholder group, before we take it to a bigger stakeholder group. But yes, it's collaboration first and foremost.
So I'm curious, we're talking about bringing a group together. So do we have the issues identified before we get the groups together, or do we develop the issues after the stakeholder groups are there? Sandy, your thoughts on that?
I think it's both. I mean, you're not going to, if you don't already know the issues, then you probably don't need to meet. I mean, the issues are going to be so prevalent. 811's going to hear about them. 811's field people are going to hear about them. They're going to be prevalent, whether in enforcement. So you're going to know most. So I think you have a core to start with. But I think when you get the group together, you've got to open it up for other suggestions. Because you got to get everybody's buy-in. And if you limit that, you're going to lose a lot of people. Because I know that we have in this process learned of things we didn't think about at all, and they became some of the biggest issues once we sat down. So I'd say it's both.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, Bill?
Absolutely. But you got to get them to the table. So you got to have something to get them there. And sometimes, depending on the level of controversy, will depend on if they attend or not. But yeah, I agree with Sandy. It's you know what you're after, but it's got to be something intriguing enough to at least get them interested in coming to find out more. But then once you get them together, yeah, Pandora's box is open. That's when all the ideas are going to come to the table, and you vet what's good, what's bad, what can people live with, what people can't live with.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Kemp, along those same lines, do you think bringing stakeholders together, even in those years where you're probably not going to legislation, is there value in keeping that group together, discussing what they hear and sharing experiences and hearing the objections to one another's thoughts?
Absolutely. The way I see it is, with the dig laws, they're always in a flow. They're moving because we have new technology. We've talked about virtual white lining. We have, there's more out there. There's new software that could be able to create different things. but we need to keep talking about it. I regularly go to our utility coordinating council meetings in the different counties. So that's a discussion there, even though the utility coordinating councils were really meant about trying to get different utilities to understand when the different new underground utilities are going to be installed, or what, so they can all coordinate together. But it's really been more of a push around 811s and damage prevention as a whole. But we talk about that kind of stuff on a regular basis because we need to have that knowledge out there. And it might even, that collaboration, it might even, I hate to say it, a lot of times it's somebody calling me on the phone saying, hey, what can we do about this? And then that helps out, because then I say, how about you come join us at some of these meetings, at these UCC meetings, come join us so you can have that, put your input. I shouldn't be the voice for everybody, and you can have your own voice at some of these meetings. And that does help. And our local energy, Puget Sound Energy, is real good about their damage prevention is real good about bringing excavators to the plate to some of this, so that we can have more conversations. So.
So Bill, how do you facilitate those kinds of meetings? It basically turns whining about stuff or complaining about stuff into real concise discussions that deals with specific issues and solutions. How do you do that?
I think you have to have a good leader, a good facilitator of the meeting, somebody that's going to keep them on track. And I think that gets back to, if you get this group together and you establish a mission, when people start getting sidetracked and going off down these rabbit holes, you point back to the mission and say, this is why we're here. We're here for damage prevention. We're not here for this. We understand that's important, but we got to understand we can't solve all world problems. We're just trying to tackle this. So I think it takes a good leader to keep people focused, keep people engaged, and also pull people in. When you have somebody participating in the meeting and they're just kind of sitting there stone-faced, not participating, I think the leader of the group needs to understand that their input is important. So you got to pull them in to the conversation, identify them.
Sandy, it occurs to me that occasionally there'll be a stakeholder group that's just absolutely opposed to a specific issue. My question is, so they may not show up until it's late in the process and they feel like, oh shoot, this is going to happen. We better get in there and say something. So how quickly do we need to try to get, I'm going to say, the opposition? They're our friends, but they're opposed to the concept. How soon do we need to get those who are opposed to these ideas involved in meeting with the other stakeholder groups?
Yeah. So my personal opinion, in the way that I've handled all legislation I've worked in for a long time, is as soon as you can. I mean, early as possible. And maybe there's a little bit up front and some prep work. It is very easy to kill legislation. And if you have a detracting group that is not going to come along, it's not hard to go get something killed at the Capitol. All that they have to say is we're not in agreement. And it's easy for a chairman or a sponsor to say, well, let's just work on it another year. Y'all come to a consensus. And so I would say early. And I think that what you need to be prepared to do, if possible, is offer some compromises. If there is a group that is just, look, some groups may be served well by the status quo. The idea of legislating is only going to hurt them in their minds. They may not have thought through it in their minds. So be willing. Is there something that we can give to get them on board that wouldn't, so there's a lot of moving parts. It can't, in my opinion, it just can't be, this is the issue, this is the solution, this is the language, take it or leave it. It's not a recipe for success.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Roger,
Yes.
The legislative process is a compromise. It's give and take, and it's easy to identify what you want, but it's more important to identify what you're willing to give to get what you want. And it's just understanding both sides of the coin, because we know what we want, but you got to understand there's going to be opposition to that. So you gotta be willing to give something to attract them into what you're trying to get. So it's a compromise both ways.
Kim, have you experienced that?
Most definitely. Yeah, very much so. And you're absolutely right. There's compromises that have to happen. When I would go back to the excavation community and say that we're not we're not going to be fighting a certain animal anymore, they get all upset. And I said, well, but we have to compromise and be happy that we still have this section in there because that's more important than what we just lost. And it really is not. It's not fair, but it's like Sandy said, this is a political process, and it's a struggle sometimes.
There are some states who've attempted dig law amendments or changes and have routinely failed in that attempt. From your perspective, Bill, what do you think are some of the major causes of failing to get needed legislation passed? What are we doing wrong?
It's doing your due diligence, getting the stakeholders together and coming to agreement. Because I can tell you for a fact, when you go in and you meet with a legislator and you pitch them your amendment, your bill, one of the first questions that they're going to ask, or second or third question, is, okay, I know what you want, but who doesn't want this? Who's going to be opposed to this? And so to be able to say, when you're meeting with that legislator and they ask you that question, to say, everybody's on board. We've got this committee of these stakeholders. Everybody is in agreement. And that's what that legislator wants to hear, because they don't want to get sidetracked when they're up there presenting the bill in front of committee. They don't want to have that person nail them with a question or an opposition. They want to know the rails have been greased. So I think it's just getting everybody together. And then when you're meeting with those legislators, you're meeting with your sponsors, making them understand these are the people that have been involved. This is what we've agreed upon, and there's no opposition. That's how you successfully pass legislation.
So from that regard, Sandy, I mean, does this need to be perceived by the legislators as not necessarily I'll use Mississippi since that's where you're working, Mississippi 811 piece of legislation? The legislators want to know that stakeholders and utility companies, excavators are in favor of this or have signed off on this outside, not just Mississippi and their board of directors wants this done. Is that fair?
Yeah. Well, it's 100%. And what Bill said, I agree with completely. To me, the best way to do this is you go to the sponsor, potential sponsor, chairman, whatever, and lay out. Don't even wait for him to ask you who opposes it. You tell him on the front end, this is everybody that supports it. We may have, one detractor. Maybe there's a group that opposes it, and lay it out for him. We just can't reach an agreement on this. We've got these 10 groups that are for it, can't. We're willing to work with. We may need a little help. And we don't want you to be surprised. Look, you've got to build trust with these people. If you burn them once, good luck. I mean, it's just, and so, I think the whole process is being very transparent with them. And the reality is this, we're talking to sponsors in the House or the Senate. And I always say, do file them in both places for a lot of reasons, but 95% of these legislators are not going to know about this legislation until they see it come up on a committee at all. And so I think that, getting that out ahead of time would be is super helpful. And Roger, you asked a specific question. I didn't answer it. Bill's answer was so good. I went back to that. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. So my question had to do with whatever this potential legislation is it more effective if it's from a damage prevention group that includes other than just the 811 center itself?
Yes. Let me just tell you this, no matter how you do it, They're going to call it 811 legislation. They're going to tell everybody it's 811 legislation, no matter what. And most of them don't even really know what 811 does a lot. They just think 811 does all the locating. So we all live in the world where that's the reality. But absolutely, I think that it's, it's 811 laws. We can agree to that, Douglas, but it is this group, this coalition. I am very adamant. Like, these are all the groups and people. And I list the ones up top who are, for better or worse, the biggest, that contribute a lot. I know that may be local to the chairman, their local water district, whatever, the people when they have to go back home. Absolutely. Because 811 itself, I try to employ, it is a call center and it's a great resource. But this is, I'm just going to throw it out there. This is AT&T, and this is, this company and this company. These are the ones that are doing it. So this is the big contractor association that's doing it. So yes, absolutely, they need to know, and you need to get those members, like the big utilities contractors who are on board, to get their lobbyists that they have at the Capitol to help with that. I think the more the merrier.
I think also, Sandy, I mean, those are great points, and I'll add. The 811 is the neutral party. We don't dig, we don't own underground utilities, and we don't locate. We're just the voice in between. And so sometimes it's nice to be able to stand behind that curtain and say, hey, we're here representing everybody, because we really are. We're not advocating for the utility. We're not advocating for the excavator. We're advocating for damage prevention. And that's a great position to be in, because some people will say, well, what's in this for 811? Nothing. It's the service we provide. We're a nonprofit organization. There's no profit margin we're trying to achieve here. So it's nice to stand behind that curtain and play that role as a neutral party.
Agree. Yep.
Kemp, I imagine, even though you're in a completely different environment, that what you're hearing probably would define your process in Washington. Any additional comments? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm probably going to be getting my two other panelists aren't going to be the happiest with me, but
okay.
because they're lobbyists. What we need to do is, I know that the lobbyists need to be there to get in front of the legislators, because if I walked in to talk to a legislator, they're going to, in fact, when we were rewriting our law here and I was asking for votes, I emailed them and I got one email back out of the 6 that I emailed. Okay, so I know there's a need for the lobbyists, but what also the lobbyists are, and I know you guys are both a little bit more in tune, but some of the lobbyists I've dealt with in the past, I reached out, or when I was on calls with them, I wasn't on calls with the people, the boots on the ground making the decisions. And I said this at the national summit, but when on the call, I asked the lobbyists, I said, how many times have you guys ever called 811? And they said, and it was a big silent 0. And I said, how many of you guys have ever operated big machinery? It was a big 0. Okay. We need, and utilities excavate also, we know that. So they're on both sides of it, but we need people that understand what's going on in the ground. And then the lobbyists can be the voice for that. But when I'm sitting there on calls with just lobbyists, it's a killer, because they don't really know what's going on the ground, and then they're trying to explain it. Again, I'm probably not going to be the biggest. They're not going to be my biggest fan for the other gentleman here. But when I sat there and talked in front of legislature, they would ask us questions about putting a plant in the ground or something to that effect, because they really don't know about it. So we really need to have people going in, and maybe the lobbyist gets us into that front door, and then having talking points to then talk to the legislators of people that are boots on the ground.
Yeah. Roger, I want to add to that.
I wish you would.
And Kemp, and I'm going to speak for Bill. I think we probably both agree with you wholeheartedly, and that is not an offense. When you have a coalition like this that is so focused on specific issues, damage prevention, having that group represented by contract lobbyists that just, they just live in a political and capital world, it's not effective. I mean, I would agree with you. To get you in the door and all that, like, that's fine, but this is you're dealing with people who legislators who generally do not know this world whatsoever outside of their own yard, or maybe their own district. They've had issues. So we're very fortunate. Tennessee's very fortunate. Place people that kind of do both, that we're lobbyists, but we live in this world and we know it. But I agree. I would err toward having a lobbyist, even if they're not as experienced and is not as expensive, who knows this. If you represent the coalition, the group, and then let the utilities bring them in, contractors, and let their lobbyists kind of help that, But yeah, I agree with you. You got to have some, because this is probably the only exposure a legislator is going to have to it, and you better be able to explain it to them and have credibility doing it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
So does the frequency of going to legislation enhance your ability of getting legislation passed, in that you get to know legislators? Perhaps you've learned who the right sponsor is. Is that all important, Bill? Or just go once every 25 years and hope you get lucky?
Legislation is a day-to-day fundamental for us. And there's two schools of thought on introducing legislation. Some people think if you go too often, you wear out your welcome. Some people think if you don't go often enough, then you have to re-educate them on who you are year after year. Personally, I side on going frequently. And to Kemp's comments, our legislators know who Tennessee 811 is. Mm-hmm. They understand the 811 process. We typically will introduce bills every 2 or 3 years. We've done back-to-back years on occasion. And it's always to improve the law. It's not to try to advocate for something that's unique. It's to improve our damage prevention efforts. So we do a quarterly magazine. Every one of our legislators get a copy of that magazine. So typically when I walk into their office and start talking to them, there's a copy of the magazine sitting on their coffee table that I can refer to and say, oh, I see you've had the latest magazine. Have you read the recent article about blah? Yeah. But yes, I am an advocate. Matter of fact, it's interesting. We've been very fortunate with our House and Senate sponsors. And a few years ago, our House sponsor, we'd gotten our bill passed, and he came up and he said, are we ever going to fix this one call law? And I said, no, we're not going to ever fix it, because it's an ongoing thing. It's a living, breathing document that things change and we need to improve it. So no, we're going to keep after this thing. And the other thing that I'll say to that is, when you're picking your sponsors, they want to know who you are, because they're worried about success. They want to know that they're going to pass that bill. They don't want the opposition. They don't want a bad mark against them that they introduced a bill. And in some states, they can only carry so many bills per session. So they want to make sure that what they're carrying has a really good chance of passing. And so that's where, going on a more frequent basis, we're trusted. They understand that we're not trying to do anything shady, that we've got all the stakeholders involved. We've greased the rails for them. So that's why I'm an advocate of going more often than not.
Okay, Sandy,
your thoughts? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that is. I agree with Bill. With a caveat. And this comes from a place where, in a state, we just got through with our 3rd year in a row with legislation, and all passed, and it's been comprehensive and great. And 2 years before that, we had 3 years of it straight. There can become fatigue with this in this world. And Bill, I think that when you said, like, are we going to ever get this fixed? That's kind of indirectly suggesting such fatigue, right. And so, yes, being there, being present is important. It's also important to know, like, we got to pump the brakes. Like in Mississippi this year, there are things we could do, but basically I get enough signals where it say, like, guys, we got to just take a year off and let this stuff go into effect. But I still think it's important to be in the Capitol world. There's nothing more effective than talking to legislators, spending time with them, educating, and not asking them for anything. Like that's important. And so even if you're not up there with legislation, still be present. Be at House and Senate utility, whatever the committee meetings are. Be there. Be responsive. You know, the magazine provide information. I think it's good. Don't let it sit dormant. But be aware, like if you've done a lot. Now, Roger, if the issue is states are having a difficult time passing stuff, you got to keep trying. But when you are successful, know like, okay, let's give them a break for a little bit. So, yeah.
So Kemp, I'm not taking sides here, but it sounded like in your introduction that you were involved in 2011 and in this past year, which, you know, I'm not good at math, but that's 13 to 14 years apart. Did you have anything else in between that, or is that just the way you do things in Washington?
No, we had another small little revision that went down in don't quote me on the year, 2020, 2019 or something like that, but it was just a small little quick revision. I wasn't involved with that one. But we also did take it was a short session in 2024, and we went in front of legislation and spoke in 2024. We knew nothing was going to happen in 2024. It was strictly like Bill was saying, it was more about an educational value than it was knowing that we're trying to get something passed. So it was getting in front, having those conversations. And, you know, when I went and spoke in front of legislation, I was told I was going to have 5 minutes. I got there and I was told I had one. So I was like, okay, how did we go packed here, ready to go? And it's like, now I got to change things up. And so, I got across what I wanted to say. We didn't have positive response in our law. And I said, we absolutely need that for, you know, protection of worker safety and through that process. So then we came back with 2025, and they, you know, there was a couple of people that are on the committee, and they said, well, weren't you guys here last year? And I said, yeah, but we were here to debate, you know, but it died because it was a short session, but we're back for it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
When you have these stakeholder coalition groups, can the passion of some of these groups have unintended consequences on other stakeholders at the table? By that, I mean our friends in the gas industry who are federally regulated. I remember back in a couple of occasions, different states, when we were pursuing mandatory membership, that our water operator friends felt intimidated by the passion of the gas and pipeline folks. And so I remember working with the real passionate group separately to try to mute some of the things they were saying, so we could give our water folks a chance to be heard and not feel like they were stupid or second-class citizens, if that makes sense. Have you experienced that in your legislative journey of getting these folks together? Do you kind of have to balance, if that's a fair word, the passions of the different groups at the table, Bill?
They need guidance. They need somebody to lead them down the path, and absolutely. If I feel like something to that effect is happening, gas is being mandated from a federal level, and they need something passed, then I'll typically meet with them privately and say, look, I understand. I get that you need this, but some things you can't include everybody, or it's that compromise again. You want this, what are we willing to give the other side to get an equal buy-in? But yeah, absolutely. I think it comes back to whoever's leading this legislative agenda group and how they interact.
I know there are some states, Sandy, who've tried to get legislation passed and they've failed for whatever reason. Good people, they failed. And so a lot of times their tendency is to bring national experts in as witnesses to show the legislators that every other state, you know, north of the Mason-Dixon line has done this, and here we are. From your experience in dealing with the legislators who mostly focus on local issues, what is the balance there? I mean, do we need to have more local input from the stakeholder groups, or is it really effective to bring these national experts in to push them across the finish line? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, let me. It's a good question, and I start with the idea of the common theme that all politics are local, right? And so, from where I stand, first of all, in a legislative session, I know for us, and I think for Tennessee, is relatively short. They're not spending hours and hours on committee meetings for issues like this. And so, to me, and I see it all the time, the local, on the ground people who see it, who live in their district, who they see in places, hearing stories about how a project can't happen in a certain part of the state because that's way more effective generally than bringing in a national expert. Where I am, if you're going to bring in somebody from out of state, then it would be nice to have a platform where they could present at a committee meeting, and preferably somebody reasonably close to where you are. I mean, I don't know, for example, that, in Mississippi, if we brought in an expert from California, that it would be effective, politically for, geography, for the different thing, and vice versa. California brings somebody from Mississippi, so you have to consider all those things. But I think local generally is more effective. But also, though, Roger, one last thing is always know, when I go in to meet with the chairman, things like, have good knowledge of what your surrounding states are doing about this. They might not care for me what's happening in New York, but they will ask what's happening in Alabama and Tennessee and Louisiana. That's on the table. So that's all I'd say.
Okay. Kemp, your experience in that, your thoughts?
Yeah. Basically, I agree. I think local is better, but also agree with Sandy that your bordering states share a lot of the same qualities. And in some cases, like in Mississippi, share some of the same utilities as other states.
True.
So that, they're going to carry, those utilities are going to carry a voice because, well, that's the way we did it in Oregon. Why can't we do it in Washington that way? Because we operate in both states. And then a lot of times, I'm going to meet next week with NUCA of Eastern Washington and Northern Idaho. They have a lot of excavators that work in both states. So we need to then, it's local, but it's local, I think, regional. I agree. You bring somebody in, if we, brought somebody in from Washington, D.C. to the state of Washington, it ain't going to fly. Yeah. It really isn't. It's you're not going to hold a whole lot of weight. Now back to, Bill's, I would just add something to what Bill said about, the gas, company is, we all know gas goes boom. Okay. And it carries a lot of weight. So does power. I kind of, what he was talking about made me think about me doing as a subcontractor with construction companies. You have certain construction companies and excavation companies that hold a small standard when it comes to safety. And you have some that hold a higher standard when it comes to safety. And if you, as a subcontractor, go in and you have to meet that standard of the excavation company that holds that higher standard, but then take it to the other companies that you're a subcontractor and you operate with that higher standard, more than likely you're going to be looked at as more of a professional when it comes to it. So, I mean, it's an analogy, but hopefully that makes sense.
No, I get it. I remember a legislator telling me back years ago in Arkansas when we were trying to get some legislation passed. And I explained to him that PHMSA, which, a national regulatory agency that carries a lot of weight with certain organizations, I remember telling him that, they were pushing to get this kind of legislation passed. I remember this older gentleman looking me square in the eyeball and saying, we don't much care what anybody outside of Arkansas thinks about anything. And I thought, well, okay, that's a viewpoint. Whether I agree with it or not, I realized that was the threshold that we had to address. Bill, I know you faced those similar kind of comments over the years. What are your thoughts about the impact of experts locally versus experts outside?
Yeah, I learned the hard way. Back when we were first trying to pass our enforcement legislation, it was all predicated on, hey, if we don't do this, the federal government's going to come in and do it. And we would preach that to the legislators. And I was faced with the response of, I don't care what the federal government says they're going to do. We're going to do it this way in Tennessee. So it's a balancing act. There's times that those things can come to your advantage, but it's a lot of it is understanding the committee that you're testifying to. And I can tell you for a fact, the House is different than the Senate. The House is more local oriented, where the Senate, their districts are usually a bigger area, bigger footprint. They have more people that they deal with, not as much intimate face-to-face interaction with their constituents. So understanding your audience is very important, depending on what committee you're testifying before or where the bill's coming up at. But just be careful. You can use those things to your advantage, but understand who your audience is.
Yeah. Sandy, I suspect that most 811 centers would not know who to select as a sponsor for a particular piece of legislation, typically. And I suspect they would rely on the lobbyist who has been up there quite a bit. I mean, just kind of help me understand, do you just pick your friends to sponsor? Or, what is that process, and how do we know that we've got the right sponsor? Just help me understand that.
Sure. And this is an area where I think that you should rely on your lobbyists, because picking a sponsor can be the single most important piece of this. And picking your friend is not usually the answer alone. Picking someone who's a friend of the damage prevention and knowledgeable, that's great. My goal is, if I can, every time I try to pick a sponsor who is the committee chairman that it will go through. So in Mississippi, we have House Public Utilities Committee, we have Senate Energy Committee. I know that every one of these bills is going through those committees, and the chairmen have complete discretion of what comes up in their committee or not. And if they bring it up and their name is on it, it's coming out, just almost without exception. And usually it's going to pass, it's going to come up on the floor and pass on the floor if other things don't develop along the way. If you pick somebody else, you need to make sure that they don't have to have a great relationship with the chairman, but you need to make sure they don't have a bad relationship, that there's something else going on, and that they don't have a bad relationship with leadership of the chamber, for us, the House Speaker or the Senate Lieutenant Governor, because there's some of that. There's, just because they are all elected doesn't mean they all see eye to eye. And I don't mean just on political issues. It can be personal. It can be things. You need to make sure you at least have somebody who the committee chairman likes and respects, and the leader likes and respects. Because I will tell you, and Bill, I know you've seen it, there are plenty of people in majority power over the years whose, if their name is on a bill, it's not going anywhere. I mean, just for that. So yeah, I like to start, and committee chairman may say, I'm with you, but let me get you to get my committee member so-and-so to do it. He's newer, or he's like, I want to get him more involved. And that's the same thing. You got their support. So that's my philosophy anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Avoid
freshman legislators that are new to the block. They don't understand. They don't have favors to ask from others. But as Sandy said, we always target committee chairs, even if it's the committee chair that your bill's going through, that's a home run. But if you can't get that person, even if you get a committee chair from another committee, there's a lot of back scratching that goes on. You're trying to get a bill through this committee, and that chairman of that committee may be trying to get a bill through the other committee. So trying to target committee chairs. And as Sandy said, these guys, they dictate where the bill shows up on the calendar, and there's a whole different strategy there on, do you want your bill to be heard at the beginning of the committee meeting or at the end of the committee meeting, where you want your bill to be placed in the calendar? Do you want it before something that's controversial, that's got a lot of attention? Do you want it after? There's just a whole strategy there. So yeah, picking your sponsor is key to success.
Yep. Bill, picking the appropriations chairman wouldn't be a bad idea, would it? They're gonna need need him for other things.
That's right.
Yeah. Cam, did you know it was so much doing favors inside the Capitol when you got started doing this? Did you need to understand that?
Well, when I started doing it, I had no clue that it was that way. And then I watched House of Cards. And, and then I realized it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. There's a whole lot of back scratching that goes down. So no, and didn't know that, but learned that, and we've continue to try to figure it out. I mean, exactly what you're saying. We had this year we went to the committee chair. It just happened. We had a new governor, and they plucked the committee chair up for one of the governor's roles. And so we had to start new with a new sponsor. Right. And so that was a difficult little step. But we found a good person, and he put some tests on some of the utilities and some of the cities and whatnot, municipalities, and we did pretty good. Just like we've talked about, is it a perfect law? No. Is it ever going to be a perfect law? No. But we were able to get some good leverage, and it's not even at the on the Hill kind of stuff that is the big issue. It's even just the back scratching, like we talked about earlier, just in the stakeholder group. It starts there with the taking care of each other, and then it moves on, and it's always, it seems like somebody's always got their hand out kind of thing.
I had a lobbyist years ago tell me, you take care of all these questions outside the Capitol, then when you get here, you hand it to me, and you only talk to people inside the Capitol building when I turn and look at you and say, why don't you tell him what you know? And I thought that was good advice. That told me to let him do what he was good at. There's several bills that die in committee. If I have a bill that dies in committee, what should I learn from that, Sandy?
Well, I mean, most of the time, if it dies in committee, that it's going to die in committee before the deadline. I mean, there's some pushback for some group, but I'll tell you the number one reason, if you go through the process we're talking about and a bill dies in committee, it's because some detractor group within your coalition is pushing back, and it's just much easier for a committee chairman to say, look, I'm not going to do this until you work it out among yourselves. This isn't something that I want to bring up to have a fight over. It's just not one of those big ticket issues. Come back to me next year when y'all work it out. So usually that is the reason. Now, if you don't do the groundwork ahead of time, if you don't have a coalition and talking and somewhat of a consensus and talking, and you just show up and file a bill, it's probably gonna die in committee. I mean, most of the bills, most bills die in committee well before they get to the floor. So
yeah, I'll add to that. When you say die in committee, I recognize that as it got voted down, and that's where counting your votes before the committee is very, very important. If you feel like it's not going to pass when it's voted on, take the bill off notice. Don't let that happen, because you can live to fight another day. If it gets voted down, you got to almost start all over again. So counting the votes of the committee, understanding how people are going to vote prior to, can prevent that from dying in committee.
Yep.
So if you had a coalition group, okay, and your group basically appeared as if they were for it, And then you find out when it actually goes into legislation that one member of that coalition changed their mind. Is that an indication that the stakeholder group representative wasn't in tune with the lobbyist position or decision maker's position? And if that's the case, who do you go to? Do you go back to that stakeholder representative, or do you go to their lobbyist and start trying to work for next year? That's an open question. Anybody want to take that? Where do you go?
I'll
Back to the
say,
stakeholder
I
group?
mean, it's happened a lot. And the kind of a trick of the trade is what I've discovered is the last lobbyist that walks into that legislator's office, that's typically how that legislator is going to vote. It's the last person they talk to, especially if they're not intimate about whatever you're trying to pass. So be aware of what other lobbyists are talking to the legislators that are on that committee.
Okay.
But as they're walking into the chamber for the committee meeting, give them a thumbs up, wink of the eye, just make sure that they're still on board. But when that happens, I mean, we've had it. We've had stakeholder groups that have said, oh, yeah, we're all for this. And then at the 9th hour, they come in and say, yeah, we just can't do this. And it's frustrating, but that's just the process. You can't take it personal. I take it personal, and our lobbyist that works with me, I mean, he constantly tells me, Bill, don't take it personal. You just, it's part of the process.
Yeah.
Work harder.
Work harder.
Yeah. I would I agree with Bill. The ways that can happen, where I have seen this happen before, is, and it's especially with bigger groups that have their own lobbyists. So XYZ has their own lobbyist at the Capitol. What happens a lot is XYZ, we'll say utility, has a lot of other issues that are more visible within that company's headquarters. All right. I mean, damage prevention is one thing, but so is, getting money or for out of some fund or other things. Sometimes the damage prevention people, who are the ones who should be and are involved in the coalition, there's not necessarily a connect between headquarters and what the lobbyist for that group is doing. And so, so you think you have an agreement, but then later in the process, headquarters saying, like, we can't do that. That's been a disaster for us in Tennessee or something. And so that's, but I also think the lesson is to have relationships with the chairman of these committees to the best you can, constantly and year round, so that we're in a place in Mississippi where if somebody comes in and has an issue with the bill, the chairman will say, you need to talk to Sandy. Like, they will send them. And so to build that relationship. So, because what Bill's telling you is that's the worst nightmare of all. If somebody goes in and they're the last one and they can get to that person and you have no knowledge, man, that's tough. So those are my two thoughts. Kemp may have something good too.
Yeah. Kemp, what do you think?
Yeah. There's always the 11th hour, somebody that throws something in. I mean, in our recent revision, there was something that stayed in the law that I thought was completely out, and it just shot me in the knee. It was just really, really, because I originally during conversation said, I'll kill any chance of this going through if that stays in. They just held it out until the last minute, and boom, it was there. So it's just it's all rough, rough to deal with, and it's back to the politics that I'm learning. I'm no lobbyist, but I'm learning it, and it's a rough buy. Like I said, like Bill said, it's I take it personal. I try not to. I still try to stay friendly and across the board. So it's it is what it is, but we just got to move forward and look at it down the line.
Right. Hey guys, y'all been great. We're running out of time, so I'd like to ask you one last question before we've only got like 6 minutes or so. So give me a minute or so of what you think from your perspective. What's a key takeaway from this topic today for you? Kemp, why don't you start with it? Key
Yeah,
takeaway.
my key takeaway is one, we started off with collaboration, and I think and we talked about all the different different states and what they can do and how they're doing. I think we need to get together and with the Nuke national side of things is get together and each chapter discuss what their laws are and what's going to be best and move forward, try to do the right thing in damage prevention as a whole. Each law out there starts out their intent with damage prevention, worker safety, public safety, and we need to really focus on that as a group. Across the nation, each law is going to be a little bit different, but the meat and potatoes are going to be the same. So we just got to keep that up and try to keep up damage prevention as a whole, because just like I said with the intent, it's not just if internet goes out at my house, my world's stopped, because it's not just about the boom. And my internet goes out, my wife's the boom goes off. So we got to take care of each other, and that's what these dig laws are about.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thanks for being with us today. Sandy, your key takeaway today.
Yeah, I would just say if you've not had success legislatively, just evaluate and be aware of sort of what you can do, but don't be discouraged. I was looking at this the other day in Mississippi, and of the 3 people on this call, even 4, probably Roger, with you, we're the least populous state. But in a 90 days, 3-month session, just last year, and this is about average, we had like 32 or 3,300 bills filed. About 200, just over 200 became laws. That's how difficult it is. It's a little bit of a needle in a haystack. But if you handle this right from beginning to building the coalitions, to building the relationships, to doing it, you potentially have a path to much easier legislative process than most any others. It's just difficult because in damage prevention, there are necessarily 100 stakeholder groups. In some groups, that's not the case, but there are a lot. So don't be discouraged. Just know that it's not difficult and keep trying. And I think anybody on this call would be happy to talk to any state specifically and give any help or insight.
Sandy, you've been a blessing to me. I appreciate you, my friend. Bill?
Ditto.
I think it's commit yourself. What we're trying to do is for the betterment of everybody. So don't sit back and wait for somebody else to take the lead. Just commit to it. Commit to it. Be a participant, knowing that you're going to make mistakes. It's a learning process. It's hard, but it's worth doing. So I think my takeaway is, if you feel like it's important and you're not sure exactly how to go, ask the people that have done it before, but commit to it. Don't be scared.
I think that's sage advice. I've gone to Bill with lots of questions, and he don't always answer them the way I want them answered, but he hadn't let me down yet. I can tell you that for sure. I really appreciate y'all being on board. I think this is a topic, it obviously affects all of us. Some states have had a lot more success than others. It doesn't necessarily mean they're smarter or have greater intellect because you guys have been successful in the past, but it does mean that you've learned how to do it and do it well and learn from when it doesn't go your way. I would note that there is a link for a town hall survey. We would appreciate you filling that out, those of you who are still with us. Those of you who will look at this later hopefully for some advice. And we just want you to know we appreciate you being with us, and a shout out to our member companies who have continued to support what we're doing here at ACTS. And we'll be coming your way next month with another topic. Look for it by email. Thank you kindly.
Welcome to our monthly ACTS Town Hall. Thanks to our member companies for helping make these town halls possible. Your support makes our mission a reality. Together in safety, stronger in collaboration. The ACTS Town Halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. These town halls are meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. A recording of this town hall will be posted on our YouTube channel and sent via email after the town hall has concluded. Before the end of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We are pleased to have a knowledgeable and experienced panel with us today. So to get us started, our moderator will begin with brief introductions. Thanks to all of you, our panelists and our moderator, for sharing your expertise. Please take a moment now to fill out a brief survey that will be posted in the chat so we can continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. Be sure to register for next month's town hall by visiting our website. Again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next month.